We have to adapt and find our center in the midst of a really busy and chaotic world, and dealing with people who can really trigger us and be difficult, because that can disturb our inner peace.
Inner peace, it's something that the world outside of us doesn't motivate, doesn't inspire. The world is geared towards excitement, towards stimulation. And stimulation, interestingly, is the antithesis of peace. And when you look at some of the most fulfilled people, and to the point where they actually remove themselves from anything that can be the opposite of peace, which is removing themselves from the stimulating world. We don't necessarily want to exclude ourselves from the world, but what we can do and what's possible for us, and we're only just starting to discover this over the last few decades, is that we can actually attain inner peace whilst being in the world and whilst having families, whilst having financial situations. So we don't need to shave our head, put on robes and go and run away from the stimulating world, but we can be in that world and find inner peace. And I think it's the key component to what's missing for most of humanity right now. There's a natural inclination for resilience and realizing the human potential. Unrealized human potential is really unpleasant. It's an unpleasant experience. It's what causes a lot of stress, is unrealized potential. The thing that holds us back from realizing potential predominantly is fear. Humans would rather be unhappy than go into uncertainty. If your inner state is in turmoil, that will be something that you start manifesting more of in the outer world. So if we really want to change the outer world, we've really got to start with changing the inner world first.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Dreamcatcher podcast, a place where your dreams can find a voice. I'm your host, Celine Chenoy. Thank you to all of you who return every week to tune in to become a better version of yourself. Make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already, and rate our show if you enjoyed this episode. Have you ever noticed how quiet moments, those with no noise or rush, feel different? Today, we're discussing how these pockets of stillness can transform your life and even ripple out to impact the world around you. I'll be discussing this issue with Tom Cronin, a meditation expert who has helped thousands of people find more peace in everyday life. Today, you'll have the opportunity to hear his solutions for achieving true calm. Stick with us. You might see the simple moments in a brand new way. Tom Cronin worked in finance for 26 years as a top bond and swap broker. Early on, stress pushed him to try meditation, which changed his life. Tom started the Stillness Project to help people find calm through daily stillness. Founder of the Stillness Project, a global movement to inspire 1 billion people to sit in stillness daily, Tom is passionate about reducing stress and chaos in people's lives. His ongoing work in transformational leadership coaching and corporate training has seen him working with some of the top companies in the world, like Amazon, Oracle, Harvard Business School, Qantas, UBS, and Coca-Cola. He's spoken at major events, written 6 books, and produced the hit film, The Portal. Tom is going to break down the mind-body connection, show us how stillness can make a significant difference, and share what he has learned from working with people around the world. We'll discuss practical ways to slow down, explore how quiet moments shape who we are, and explore how they can even contribute to creating a better world. If you want simple steps to find calm, even on your busiest days, this one's for you. Hi, Tom. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thanks. Great to connect in. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Me too. How are things out there down under?
It's a bit chilly, but otherwise it's really good. I really like the vibe of Australia. I travel the world a lot and I go to a lot of different countries and a lot of different cities, but I'm in Sydney and I'm in a place called Bondi Beach, which is kind of really nice, conscious community. It's got beautiful ocean and beaches, so I really like the vibe here a lot, I must admit.
Oh, nice. Well, it's so nice to speak to someone from the other side of the world because that means I get to speak earlier in the day because most of my guests are in the US. So I tend to have my interviews during the night. Yeah, also from a beautiful place like Australia that I really want to visit. Well, I
Yeah,
actually
you have
did
to come.
visit. I did visit when I was 5 years old, but that doesn't really count because the only thing I
No, that doesn't
remember are
count.
koala bears. That's the only thing I remember in the zoo.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as a 5 year old, who can blame me? So, Tom, I'm so glad that you're here. Really looking forward to this talk because there's so much inspiration in your books. You've written a couple of them. And I really can't wait to dig into your ideas on meditation, consciousness, and how we can live with more inner peace. I think that is so important and needed in our world today.
Yeah, inner peace, it's something that the world outside of us doesn't motivate, doesn't inspire. Netflix doesn't inspire peace. Spotify doesn't inspire peace. Amazon doesn't inspire peace. Soccer games and being a fan of, sports clubs doesn't inspire peace. So the world is geared towards excitement, towards stimulation. And stimulation, interestingly, is the antithesis of peace. And when you look at some of the most fulfilled and blissfully aware people, they're people that live in a lot of serenity, a lot of peace, and to the point where they actually remove themselves from anything that can be the opposite of peace, which is removing themselves from the stimulating world, and they go into monasteries and ashrams. So we don't necessarily want to exclude ourselves from the world, but what we can do and what's possible for us, and we're only just starting to discover this over the last few decades, is that we can actually attain inner peace whilst being in the world and whilst having families, whilst having jobs, having financial situations. So we don't need to shave our head, put on robes, and go and run away from the stimulating world, but we can be in that world and find inner peace. And I think it's the key component to what's missing for most of humanity right now.
Yeah, I love that you say that because most people can't afford to go out and live on the mountains for a couple of months. We have to adapt and somehow find our center in the midst of a really busy and chaotic world. And also, dealing with people who can really trigger us and be difficult because that too can disturb our inner peace.
Yeah, the thing that's important for us to understand as humans is that there's a part of each and every one of us that its quality is peace. It's the essence of the core of who we are. We call it being, otherwise known as presence or pure consciousness. And the thing that this quality of us that we all have, it's completely unruffable. And it's not our thoughts and it's not our feelings. It's not our physicality. Those three aspects of what we seem to be ourselves, our ego, our identity, are very temporary, very changeable, very influenceable. But there's also another component to us, which very few people have become aware of just yet. That will become more so soon. And that's what we call spirituality or our spirit being. And this part of us doesn't get perturbed, it doesn't get shaken, doesn't get ruffled by circumstances. And we all have it as an aspect of our reality. It's just that we're so caught up in the external world that's stimulating our thoughts and our feelings that we tend to ignore it. So we're in what we call the age of ignorance, which is also known as the Kali Yuga. And that's because predominantly most of the world are ignoring that core component of who we are, which is our spiritual being.
And you've had quite a journey before you reached this conclusion. And I'd love to hear more about how you got started with this and how you really got into meditation and your approach evolved over time.
I was constantly chasing stimulation, and I was just hook, line, and sinker all in on, can I get the next high? Can I get the next fix? Can I get at the next level of dopamine and stimulation? So I was a broker in finance on a trading room floor, and the job itself was all about stimulation,
Yeah.
screaming and yelling and making lots of money and lots of expensive dinners and lots of expensive champagne and wining and dining. And, all of that was about satiation and our pleasure seeking. And then, that led to a lot of, I guess, we call it karmic responses, which is really symptoms in the body, which is your body telling you, giving you cues and indications that this isn't really what I appreciate you doing. So that's staying up really late and, taking lots of drugs and drinking and partying and trying to get the next high. So the body started giving me lots of symptoms, which was anxiety and panic attacks and insomnia and depression and, a lot of these really negative side effects of the lifestyle that I was living, which was really the universe trying to guide me. In hindsight, it's like, wow, my body and the universe was really looking after me by making my life hell. And that's because that was what needed to happen before I started looking for an alternative. And I got to a really dark place, really kind of what we call a bifurcation, which is sort of suicide ideation. And that's when I came across meditation, and it was a game changer, really changed my life. And I started doing these deeper styles of meditation, otherwise known as transcendental meditation or Vedic meditation. And that's when I discovered that world that was inside me that I didn't realize. I turned my attention, instead of the outside world, I started looking at the inside world. And that was a really big shift for me. I started finding that inner peace that you talked about through the meditation.
Was there a moment of insight that you had that made you kind of awaken and say, hey, this is not good for me, and this is taking a real toll on my body? Because a lot of people don't get that, and they continue living that sort of stimulating lifestyle where they're constantly on the go and they are looking for that dopamine sort of fix. What was different in your case?
It wasn't that I suddenly thought, maybe I shouldn't keep doing this. It never got to that point. It really was that I was in a really, really dark place. I couldn't go to work. I was seeing psychiatrists, I was seeing doctors, I was put on medication, seeing psychologists, put on suicide watch. But it was in that time when I was probably in my bleakest moment that I fortuitously, and maybe that was synchronized by the universe, that I was watching a documentary about a very successful businessman, and he used a particular style, he said in that documentary, a particular style of meditation called transcendental meditation. So my curiosity got the better of me. I picked up the phone book and rang them up and said, I want to find out more about this. So I went in, and what happened was one of the big key points was to start the meditation, you had to go to an intro talk. You couldn't actually just learn to meditate. They had to go to an intro talk. And the teacher said one thing in that intro talk that was like a light bulb moment for me. He said, there are two sources of fulfillment, and everyone's seeking fulfillment. Every action that we're involved in, everything that we're doing is the quest to extract and discover fulfillment in that action. And he said the two sources of fulfillment are, one is a outcome-oriented fulfillment, one that we need a particular outcome, we need a particular experience, we need a particular acquisition to generate fulfillment from that experience. And he said the problem with that is it's really fleeting, or it doesn't meet our expectation, or the outcomes don't happen, we can't get that thing, and then our fulfillment is ripped out from underneath us. And that really struck a chord with me, because it made me realize how much I've been seeking experiences to get fulfillment. And he says, but there's another alternative for fulfillment. This is a second source. And this is a self-referred internal experience that arises from within when we give it some attention. And that was like, oh, I want that one. That's the one that I'm interested in. And that's when I signed up and started meditating. And that was something that I started to find was an internal experience.
That's beautiful. Can we dig into that internal experience where we can generate those good feelings that you're talking about?
Yeah. So it's twofold. One, we can go esoteric, which we'll go to in the second part of the answer. And the first one is science-based. So for me, I was in sympathetic nervous system state pretty much 24/7 for many months, days, weeks, years. And the sympathetic nervous system state, think of S, sympathetic for stress response. So what happens is I'm in fight flight all day long because the nature of the job, staying up late, putting my body and nervous system under extreme overload and sensory, bombardment. And this keeps us in a sustained state of sympathetic nervous system stress response, which means that I'm producing high levels of cortisol and adrenaline and norepinephrine, and I'm producing low levels, if any at all, of oxytocin, serotonin, and melatonin. So these are the biochemicals for sleep, for happiness, and for love, particularly love and happiness. We can't produce serotonin and oxytocin while we've got high levels of cortisol and adrenaline in our body, because the body's saying, we don't want you to be feeling empathy and compassion and love and kindness and care and happiness whilst you're in the battle about to kill a marauding tribe that is your threat to your survival. So the body's got this system to protect you and enable you to fight or flee in this dangerous situation. And when we're in that sustained window for long periods of time, we get very unhappy, very poor in our relationships. We lead to addictions because we have low levels of oxytocin and serotonin, and it really creates havoc in our lives. But interestingly, when we meditate, we completely flip that and we reverse to the deeper styles of meditation, like Vedic meditation, where we really quickly reduce the cortisol, adrenaline, or norepinephrine and increase quite quickly the oxytocin and serotonin. So we get these bliss chemicals starting to move through our body, and they're independent of outcomes and experiences. And science has proven that we increase oxytocin when we're in these deep, calm, peaceful states. That's why we hear about people that want to hug trees when they're sort of hippies and meditators, because they just have so much love that it's like, oh, I've got so much. And really what they've got is high levels of oxytocin.
Right. Yeah. I remember Katy Perry, when she came back from that space mission, she was just overwhelmed with love. And she talked about how beautiful humanity is and how connected she felt to Mother Earth. So I don't know, that sprung to mind as you said that.
Well, interestingly, I don't know if she still keeps up with the practice, but Katy Perry traditionally and initially had been doing Vedic or transcendental meditation for a long time.
Oh, interesting.
Part of her life. Yeah.
Okay.
And so that unified experience of interconnectedness is something that we get. And this is the second part of the response to the question, is when we transcend in meditation, we're transcending our own individualized, separated, segregated identity, and we're connecting to an experiential, not conceptual, but an experiential unified field. We experience this subtle field of pervasive, interconnected, unified field, as Einstein would call it. So it's a field that's non-form and non-structure, but it's actually still a field of intelligence. And what happens is that it's like the wave suddenly realizing that it's the ocean, and that there's this interconnectedness that starts to become experiential, and this deep sense of love and compassion for all things, because all things are actually an extension of you being the unified field. And so we do cultivate this wonderful, blissful lovingness that becomes an undercurrent of our reality beyond our thoughts and feelings.
And that comes from a consistent practice of meditation.
I think it comes traditionally from consistent practice of transcendence. So there's meditation, which is listening to Matthew McConaughey do a bedtime story in the car map. There's visualizations and trying to manifest a bigger home, or Bitcoin going up, or having a new car or a new partner. These are all still under the umbrella of meditations, but
Really?
We're not going to get that. Yeah, in some degree,
but on a more superficial layer, like it's on the shallow
yeah,
end.
on a surface level. That's right.
Yeah, on the surface level.
Using some form of eyes closed experience of trying to cultivate peace or success or something. But that experience of transcendence is such a deeper, more profound experience to be had in meditation. There's not many meditation techniques that will get us into that transcendent state, but that transcendent state is critical to realize that we're not thoughts, we're not feelings, we're not even the physical form. We have a physical form, we had thoughts, we have feelings, but there's something more profound beyond that as well, not to exclude and disregard those three components to our existence. But Turiya is a Sanskrit word meaning the fourth, and that means that there's another state, a fourth state, that also known as in the Buddhist community as samadhi. Samadhi means same. Yeah. Sama is where we get the word same, and dhi means intellect. So the intellect is not changing because we're in that transcendent experience.
And is that something that you teach on your platform?
Yeah, yeah, I teach that in person, and I teach it through Zoom as well. So the way we do it, the way we teach it is that each student will get a particular resonance or vibration based upon how old they are when they learn the technique. It's a very unique process to I guess we call it initiate or introduce to the student the meditation practice. And we use these or primordial vibrations. And each student will get one based upon how old they are when they learn to meditate. And these mantras play an integral role of taking the mind inward, away from the stimuli and excitement of the outside world, and lure the mind's attention into the subtle and the silent. And the mind won't naturally go there because the mind naturally gravitates to the most expressed world. That's the world of form and phenomenon. So we need a mantra to take the mind inward to that inner space of quiet. And without the mantra, it makes it very, very difficult. But with the mantra, it makes it very, very easy. And that takes the mind deeper and deeper and deeper, eventually into this transcendent experience.
Yeah, that sounds like a very beautiful place to be in, Tom. So thank you for explaining that. But I think a lot of the everyday person struggling with the chatter within the internal chatter. And you actually cover this in your book, Portal. You write that as children, we pick up a human operating system that runs in the background and shapes the way we think and act. Firstly, can you please explain what you mean by human operating system and how we can become more aware of the early programming that impacts us?
Yeah, the way we think, the nature of our thoughts, these are what we call in Sanskrit vasanas. Now, vasana is a tendency of your mind to think in a particular habituated way. And part of that has come through the school that you went to, the country that you lived in, the religion that you were brought up by, the way your parents spoke, the way your sisters and siblings spoke to you, the experiences you had in life. And they all start to shape the way your mind starts to operate and think. But there was also some coding done actually before you came out of the womb. And so there's an ancestral tendency. So you didn't just get the color of your parents' hair and the shape of your nose from your mum and the shape of your eyes, or color of your eyes from your dad and the shape of your lips. That's the hardware.
The generational
hardware. That's your physical body. So that's the hardware. And then the software that runs the hardware. So think of your phone as the hardware, which is the physical device. And then the iOS operating system, if you've got an iPhone, is the software, which runs inside the hardware. And so your software that runs inside your hardware, which is up in the brain, a lot of that you also inherited from your parents. So people might say, gosh, you sound just like your mother, or, that's something your father would do. And so these habits or codes or constructs we inherit all the way back through many generations. And some of it can be traumatic, and some of it can be just the way they think and the things that they do and the habits that they have in their life. So we don't come into this world with a blank canvas. We come in with a deeply, just like my phone doesn't come into this world with a blank canvas that I have to start programming it. It's already programmed by coders. And so our brain is coded by coders, which is our school, our peers, our life experiences, our parents, and then obviously generations as well. So what we want to do is we want to start realizing that we have the code. There is a code. There is a tendency for me to think in a particular way. But we want to start being able to observe that. And so the observer of that becomes this transcendent experience of accessing pure consciousness. So we have consciousness, which is my thoughts and my feelings, which correlate with my thoughts. But then I also have conscious awareness itself, which is witnessing or able to witness that. And so this is what we call in Sanskrit. I like using Sanskrit because it's such a beautiful language. So sorry if I'm boring people with the Sanskrit, but
no. They're all into it. Don't worry.
Okay, cool. Sakshi Kutashta. Such a beautiful language. But the phrase or two words Sakshi Kutashta means the silent witness. And so we all have access to this silent witnessing of us. And that's when we start to go, hang on, dude, look, I know you tend to think that way, but maybe you could try thinking another way. Why don't you start thinking this way? So now we have two things, which is consciousness observing your thinking. And this is when we start getting a little bit more proactive. We go, well, look, I know you've thought that way for a long time. If we have 40,000 thoughts a day and, 90% of them are fear-based, then maybe we are wasting, 35,000 thoughts a day on fear when we could be using those we're writing, or a film that we want to create, or speaking on stage, or running a particular business, or designing an app. And So we're missing the opportunity to have such magnificent, beautiful, and expansive thoughts because we've got these vasanas that are keeping us in this recurring known and this safe place that's not really conducive for us living our full potential.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to announce the upcoming launch of my new book titled The Nomadic Soul, a seeker's guide to finding a sense of self and belonging in the modern world, which highlights a profound yet often unexplored part of your identity that holds the key to everything from answering your biggest questions to finding deeper meaning and joy in everyday life. Visit thenomadicsoulbook.com to learn more, download a free chapter, or to buy a copy. The environment that we live in and the people we surround ourselves with, I think we also need to take that into consideration, right? Because if we are living in a place that is not conducive to us having that awareness and becoming more in tune with our thoughts, that can cause us to not really notice it or have the inner peace that we need to have that perspective. So, what are your thoughts on that?
So we don't need and don't want to necessarily just go and run away from our family or run away from our job or run away from our society so that we can find inner peace. The key to this is a daily retreat, which is go and sit in your car, go and find a nice chair in your bedroom or find a spot in a foyer or on a park bench. And if you've been taught how to transcend in meditation, then this is your freedom. This is your liberation. And so the first step in the process, it's 2 steps in the process. First step in the process is, maybe there's 3 steps. The first step is realize that you've been conditioned and that you've been influenced by the world around you consistently on a daily basis. So if you see McDonald's ads after McDonald's ads after McDonald's ads, you generally would think that maybe you should be eating McDonald's. And this conditioning is happening in our lives all the time. Just looking at any Netflix TV drama, and you'll see this construct of the way we're living our lives. Or
in a toxic workplace or some environment where you're just...
a toxic workplace.
You're swimming in that energy.
Yeah. So we want to, firstly, notice that it's happening. Secondly, do something about it, which is, okay, well, at least every day, twice a day, I suggest, find some repose from that, some peace from that, and some recalibration and resetting, and claim your rightful space. And then over time, you can choose whether you want to stay in that environment or you can choose if you want to leave that environment. And everyone, predominantly most of the time, have the opportunity to make that choice. Sometimes not so. It's really difficult. Not always can someone just suddenly just walk out. So we have to work on that premise that, sometimes it's difficult and we have to just be in the mud sometimes and realize that this is going to be messy for a little while. But at least you've got your practice to find some solace and find some ability to find inner peace in that time. And then over time, what we start to find is really interesting. There becomes a dynamic shift where you've gone from being influenced to you actually being the influencer, but just in a different way. So even this podcast, hopefully at this point, there might be maybe 1, 2, 5, hopefully 10,000 people that are influenced by this conversation. And this is when we start going from having the world negatively affecting us to us positively affecting the world. And this is the transition that I think we're going through on the planet, where we've got that capacity to collectively have been conditioned to be stressed. And look, not all of the world is conditioning us to be stressed and in a bad way. A lot of the world is conditioning us to be actually really good, really harmonious, and really kind and really caring. So the world isn't a horrible, dark, mean, negative place.
You really think so? You really think
absolutely.
so?
The world's amazing, for sure. There's so many beautiful things happening on the planet right now. It's quite phenomenal. We're seeing more people access to schools and education. I was just in Bali actually with an amazing human being that has built 52 schools in Africa. Just by being a simple mum with, a few kids of her own in New Zealand. And she thought, I've got such a blessed life. Why don't I go and do something to make the world a better place in another part of the world? And so we've got all over the world incredible things happening on a daily basis. And I think in general, it's easy for us to think and judge the world to be a really dark and mean and horrible place because the media is telling us
that's
so.
what's the media. That's the media is feeding us. That's we're served really negative, sensational
Yeah,
news. So, and
we
we don't
just don't have
hear
to buy
about
into that.
these amazing individuals like this lady you just mentioned. We hear about the celebrities, Kim Kardashian, or crazy politicians. So that can make it difficult for us to see the world as a kind place that is helping us see life in a better way. So
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you and I can have this conversation with you in Dubai, me in Sydney, and many people listening to this in times in the future, and they might be in Taiwan driving their car, they might be, taking their kids to school, they might be, going for a walk on the beach in Bristol, England, if there's a beach. I don't think there's a beach in Bristol, maybe there is, but like the opportunity for us to share this knowledge and wisdom through technology is just so exciting. And I think that we are seeing rapid progress in the waking up of humanity. There's 100 million people currently using the Calm app, which is phenomenal to think that 10 years ago we didn't have meditation apps. And now we've got 100 million people tuning in to use a meditation device that helps them find some inner peace. And even me doing my work, I'm seeing, companies. I worked with a petroleum company last week. I worked with one of the largest consulting firms 3 weeks before that. I worked with Amazon and Coca-Cola, teaching them meditation techniques. So this was stuff that wasn't happening 15, 20 years ago. So when you start peeling back the veil of the mainstream media, which only wants to condition us that the world is messed up because that's how they get eyeballs on the media, we start finding that there are amazing stories of people clearing rivers of plastic in Bali, and people creating schools in Kenya, and people, creating, I don't know, helping people get out of sex slavery. So it's some really cool things happening in the world, I think.
that is such a optimistic and uplifting view that you have, Tom, and it's very, very encouraging. And it's something that you highlight in your book Portal, which I really love reading. And I particularly liked the fact that it was a collection of people's stories from all over the world, and with all different kinds of backgrounds. I'm curious to know what really stood out to you amongst all the people that you had interviewed for the book. What was the common thread that you saw in their stories?
There were three common threads that we were looking for. And look, we canvassed the world for these stories for people that we wanted to make a film about and have the book based on. And the three themes we were looking for was, did they have a crisis in their life? That was the first one. We wanted to showcase the power of meditation against a really difficult background. Not like I was brought up in a really wonderful family and then I decided to start meditating and my life got even better. Like there's not a lot of news in that one. So we wanted it to go against how meditation could showcase against a really challenging situation. So someone that lost their body through locked-in syndrome stroke, someone that broke their back who was a potential Olympian, someone that grew up in the ghetto and was traumatized by the military and the things that they'd seen. There was so many beautiful, rich stories in the Portal film and book. And so the first one was crisis. The second was that they used meditation to heal and recover and up-level from that crisis, because it could have been plant medicine or breath work or yoga or kinesiology, but we wanted to showcase the power of meditation in this one. And then the final thing was we were looking for stories of crisis that kind of overlaid on top of global crisis themes. So looking at what are the crisis themes that humanity is facing. So there's nuclear crisis theme, we've got environmental crisis theme, we've got human displacement crisis theme, so we've got sickness crisis theme. So there's a lot of crises that humanity goes through and also is facing on the horizon in the future. And we kind of wanted to bring in those global themes as well.
And what do you think really helped them get through those crises? Was it just pure meditation, or is there something else like deeper in the human spirit?
I think a bit of two things. I think there's a natural inclination for resilience, and for realizing the human potential. There's
Okay.
a natural inclination for us to obviously unrealized human potential is really unpleasant. It's an unpleasant experience. It's what causes a lot of stress, is unrealized potential. And
Yeah.
the thing that holds us back from realizing potential predominantly is fear. And I think Tim Ferriss once said that humans would rather be unhappy than go into uncertainty. And that's
true.
meaning that fear will trump unhappiness. And so the fear sensation is greater, and uncertainty creates fear, which means that we would rather be unhappy because it's less of an intensity than fear, than face fear. So unrealized potential leaves us unhappy, but it stops us being fearful, because then means we don't have to go and try something that might be we're a bit challenged by, like speaking on stage, or getting that book published, or doing something like starting a business that you thought maybe you're too afraid to do. So firstly, it's that realizing of human potential. And secondly, it was about, again, the big theme in the film and the book was that human construct of the code in our brain that led to the crisis in some aspects in a lot of their lives, to liberate themselves from that human construct and those ways of thinking through the meditation. So meditation really played a big role in liberating them from those patterns and those states that they were restricted by. Ultimately, I think all problems have solutions.
Yeah.
And the thing is, how do we find the solution? I had a major problem with our film, ironically. It was not going well. It's a long story, I won't go into it, but we got to a really, really challenging situation, which was, do we shut this project down and say goodbye to everything, or do we have to start again? And that's kind of where we got to. We had to scrap the current version of the film that we had, and we had to decide whether we just shut this down, because the existing version of the film we couldn't use. It was unusable for a number of reasons. And so I realized that the solution that I had to this problem wasn't in my mind. The solution that I had to this problem was in the field, because the field is full of all intelligence, all possibility, all creativity, and all potential. Everything that's ever been designed, from this glass frame to this Apple mouse to this little China bowl, all had to be cognized as a creative impulse, and then it had to be created and manifested. But it had to start as a creative impulse in the mind, and before it became an impulse in the mind, it was in the field of potential, and the mind basically pulled out of the field the creative impulse. And so the way I see it is this, that all solutions to all problems lie in the field. We just need to know how to access that information. And so I knew that when I meditate and when I open up my mind goes out of the vasanas inside my brain to the infinite field of mind that is outside of my brain. So my brain's in the field, just like your phone is in the internet. The internet's not in your phone, the phone's in the internet. And wherever your phone goes, it can access the internet, whether you're in Venezuela, Antarctica, if you've got Starlink, or back to Bristol, England. The field, the phone's in the field of information. And so the same thing happens with our brain when we meditate. We access the field. And I woke up at 2 a.m, having meditated and meditated and meditated for days, just lots of hours of meditation, thinking it's just going to come to me at some point when I'm not trying to think it. And I woke up with this impulse of like, I know what we've got to do. And I sat down at 2 a.m, and I pulled out my notes in my phone, and I started typing the outline of what we needed to do as the solution to that problem. And so if someone's enmeshed in a problematic situation, I would suggest, even though it's the last thing you feel like doing, but learning how to meditate and transcend in meditation, and start being calmer, being clearer, and start learning about and leaning on the laws of magnetism and attraction. Because if your inner state is in turmoil, that will be something that you start manifesting more of in the outer world. So if we really want to change the outer world, we've really got to start with changing the inner world first.
No, that's beautiful advice. So finding ways to step into that field of infinite possibilities through the magic of meditation and transcendental meditation specifically.
Yeah, specifically. And really start thinking, it's so hard, because again, this comes back to the constructs of our society. Our society has conditioned us to think that if we get things happening in the outside world, that will change and influence our inside world. That's every TV commercial is designed that
Yes.
way. So what we need to do is we need to not buy into that construct and transcend that idea. What if it was the other way around? What if I cultivated a particular state in my inside world, and then I started to attract and manifest things on the outside world? And obviously The Secret and Think and Grow Rich and all those types of books kind of are based on that premise.
Right. And those touch more on the more surface level aspects that you were talking about earlier. But to really get to that, that higher levels of being and thinking, transcendental meditation is the way to go.
I think it's just one of the tools out there that is a very efficient and very effective tools. There's plant medicine, there's yoga, there's qigong. I don't want to dismiss and invalidate all the other methodologies that add value to our lives and help us to get into those higher states. I find this is, I have a daily practice. This morning, I scraped my tongue, I did my yoga, I did some breath work, I went to the gym, and I did my Vedic or transcendental meditation. So, there's a number of different things. We need to have a very holistic approach to the optimized human experience, and that's mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual optimized experience. And all of those components, as well as many others, I do saunas, I do ice baths. My weekly routine is really the core of my existence, and everything else, because I know that if that helps cultivate a profound internal state, then I know that my relationships will be better. I know that my work will be better. I know that, other aspects of my life will be better as a result of it. They won't be perfect because that's the nature of the relative field. It's always imperfect. So I still have things that I'm trying to sort out, and all, things that aren't working out sometimes. So it's not like all of a sudden you've got wonderful peace inside and then the world just suddenly, everything goes perfectly for you. It's not the case at all.
Yeah.
It just means you have greater capacity to deal with that.
Okay. That sounds like a very powerful routine that you have, Tom. And I'm glad that you mentioned that it's a multi-pronged approach. There are many things that you do to reach that holistic state of health. Yeah.
It's funny because I look at my routine, I think, gosh, it's infant steps compared to some of my friends and colleagues.
Really?
And theirs is a lot more hardcore than mine. But
more hardcore than that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
You're hanging out with an interesting crowd. Okay. So, Tom, thank you so much for sharing your stories and your wisdom with us today. Your advice on meditation feels really doable, and your stories really showed that real change is possible both in our life and in the world. So I appreciate you being here.
It's been a pleasure. And thank you for providing this container for us to be able to have these conversations. These are few and far between conversations that we have in the world. Like you said, most of us are talking about what the Kardashians are using for toothpaste. So having that opportunity to have something a little bit deeper is really, it's an honor and a privilege. So thank you for creating this space, and thanks everyone for listening in. These conversations don't happen unless there's a captive audience that's enthusiastic about hearing this type of information. So I think more than anything, deep gratitude for the community that are interested in having these conversations, or us speaking about these things.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. If you feel inspired by what we talked about, please go and check Tom Cronin's books, Faster, Deeper, Calm, Portal, and check out his classes, his courses. They're all so fabulous. At his website, tomcronin.com, you'll find the links in the description. And please feel free to share your thoughts, your questions, your comments. And also don't forget to subscribe for more episodes like this one.